Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Gittin daf kavchet. Here's a study guide for today, so you can use it. We're going to start from the bottom of Kav Zayin and Amud. If you remember, we were in the middle of trying to figure out, let's just go back to the Mishna for 1 second, the beginning of yesterday's stuff, which was if somebody brings a get and it gets lost, then if you find it immediately, it's okay. But if it's not immediate, we have to worry that maybe it got switched with someone else's get. Other than some unique circumstances where we didn't have to worry. But that's the basic law. What we did at the end of yesterday's stuff was bring a braita where they give 5, or I think it was 5 different opinions. I forget exactly how many, but what does it mean immediate? There were many different opinions. There was either for a caravan to pass by and wait there a little bit, we saw for a person to stand there and see that nobody passed, or make sure that nobody actually stayed there for a few minutes, right? It doesn't say exactly how many minutes, but that someone actually stayed there, or to write the get, or to read the get, or to write and read the get. Okay, we saw all different opinions. And then we just pointed out that if it's found in a very unique way, where it was exactly how you left it, then you can also just assume that it didn't get switched. So now we're going to start with the second line of today's daf and see who we hold like in the terms of the immediate. Itmar. It was said that Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Itmar is usually an introduction to a machloket between a moraim, and we're going to see 2 different ways to paskin. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha shalosh shaha adam sham. That's according to the yesh omrim that were listed on the page before, which is as long as nobody stays there, or the amount of time to ensure that nobody has actually stayed there. Rabbi Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel, halacha shelo avar adam sham. Rabbi Chana paskins in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Shmuel, that it means nobody passed there, right? The amount of time for someone to have passed, but not to have stayed there. So now the Gemara just asks a very simple question, which is normally when we paskin like different opinions in a machloket, we usually say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha is like Rabbi Meir, the halacha is like this one. So lema mar halacha kemar, umar halacha kemal. Why did Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel say, oh, we hold like the yesh omrim, and the other person said we hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? To which they answer, Mishum da'apchulahu, because those opinions, what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar held, and what the Yesh Omrim held. Yesh Omrim just means others say. So which was which is a subject of debate. So it's true, we saw a braita where this one lines up there and this one lines up there. But if he said, I hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, since there was a debate about which opinion was Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar's position and which opinion wasn't, they were worried that people would get confused by their psak, and therefore they said it in the way they said it. Now we're just going to finish up with that Mishnah. It said at the end of that Mishnah, which we didn't explain what those things were. We just said they were some sort of utensil. Now the Gemara is going to explain what they are. So obviously, like usual, the words used in the Mishnah and the vessels used by the people in the Mishnah are not necessarily the same words that were used by the Amoraim. So my chapisa, it's a small flask, a leather flask. My deluskama, talika desabe. It's the satchel used by elderly people. Okay. Some people explain, well, that it's that they try to keep all their stuff in one place so they don't lose it, so they have some sort of bag where they put their stuff. We don't know exactly what it is. Again, it didn't help what the Tanaim said didn't really help the Amoraim, and what the Amoraim say doesn't really help us because we don't really understand the reality and what they were exactly talking about. Okay, now we start with a new Mishnah. And now we're going to talk about this issue of presumption of that you're still alive. Okay? Can we just assume that you haven't dropped dead in certain situations? Okay, this is going to be the topic of this Mishnah and also the next Mishnah, which we'll see at the end of today's daf. Hamivi get. Somebody brings a get, meaning he's a shaliach. So somebody appointed him to be a shaliach. The person who appointed him to be a shaliach is old. We don't know how old, but is old, and or possibly sick. Can he deliver this get? Can he assume that the person didn't die? Or does he have to worry and think, maybe I shouldn't give this get because the wife's going to think she's divorced, but maybe in the interim, the person's going to die, and there is no such thing as giving a get after death. So what does the Mishnah say? He can deliver the get and assume, this is what we call a chazaka, there's a presumption of life. Okay, until something changes, we don't assume there was a change, unless we have a real reason to believe so. But at this point, we just assume this is the situation. Bat Yisrael Hanesua Kohen. If you have someone who's the daughter of a Yisrael, she's married to a kohen, which means that she's allowed to eat teruma. We're going to have 3 totally different cases here, but they're all based on the same idea. She's married to a kohen, and her husband goes abroad. And whenever they went abroad in those days, there was a concern they might not show up. She can continue the whole time he's gone to keep eating teruma, assuming he's still alive. Somebody sends a korban chatat, a sin offering, from abroad to be brought in his place. Right? He's not there. Says, please sacrifice it for me. Well, you're a kohen working in the temple, and you think, how do I know this person's still alive? If the person's not alive, I can't bring a sin offering in the temple. It's what we call chulin la'azara. It's not actually a sacrifice. If you remember, with the chatat, there's all these strict rules. An animal whose owners died the animal has to be left to die. But the kohanim don't have to start worrying. Maybe the person's dead. No, you can bring the sacrifice and assume presumption of life. So this whole Mishnah basically assumes, even in cases where maybe there's right now, question is percentages here, and that's going to be something we're going to deal with later as well, which is like there's some sort of chance they're dead, but not a huge chance they're dead. Maybe a decent possibility, but not enough to say, oh, we really have to worry. And therefore, we assume they're still alive. Rava says, Lo shanu ela zaken shelo higia ligvurot. Okay, get ready for this. If you're close to 80, over 80, don't get too worked up, right? Things were different then, lifespan was shorter, but this is only someone who didn't get to the age of gvurot. Gvurot comes from the Mishna, ben shmonim ligvura. She is 80 years old. If you're not 80 years old, or you're a regular chole, sharov cholim l'chayim, most people who get sick, how many times you've gotten sick in your life, right? Most people who get sick get better. There's a percentage who don't, but the majority of people get better. Aval zaken shigia ligvurot. But if it's an elderly person who's already at the age of 80, or to hold off on the 100, so hold off, we're going to get there. You're going to like this next source, particularly based on what I see you writing in the chat, Adina. And so is a kohen who got to gvurot, and a goses, and someone who's on their deathbed, sherov gosesim lemita, because most people who are on their deathbed do die, low. Then we don't do it, okay? Then you have to be concerned. So over 80, the assumption is you're practically dead. Again, shorter lifespan in those days, so don't worry. And goses, someone who's on their deathbed. But Abaye doesn't like this. I'm etive Abaye. Okay, so for all of you who are thinking, 80, going to die, what? So Abaye comes and says, here's a source that goes right against what you're saying, Rav. Hamidi get, if you bring a get and the person who sent you was elderly, afilu ben mea shana, even if he's 100 years old, noten la b'chazkat kayam, you give it to her assuming he's alive. Tiyuvta, to which the Gemara says this is a definite question, and therefore it doesn't make much sense, right? What you said doesn't make sense. It can't be the 80 we assume they're going to die. Now, usually the sugyas end with a tiyuvta, and probably the sugya ended with a tiyuvta, but somebody at some point added this, which I think is really funny. You could say if he's been mea shana, it's a different story. Because once he's 100 years old, that person is shown that they defy the odds. And that therefore we can assume if you're already got to 100, you'll probably continue living. But if you're a regular person from 80 to 100, likely you're on your way out. So it's a very interesting theory here of a possibility of answering, and saying this person clearly showed they have, they can live a long life. And we see that, right? That there's some people that just, thank God, at the age of 100 could still be almost somewhat young. Anyway, it's a good line. So we basically have Rava, who says over 80 or deathbed, you're basically on your way out. And then we have Abaye who contradicts it with a braita that says even up to 100, it's not the case. So really Rava seems like he's wrong, but the Gemara suggests a possible differentiation between 80 and 100, and that 100 dafka less likely to die because of his track record, you could say. Rami le Abaye le Rava. Abaye now brings another problem with this was a problem with what Rava said, but now we're going to deal with a problem with the Mishna. And Abaye is going to ask Rava the following question. Tanan, it says in our Mishnah, that's our Mishnah. Uriminu. That contradicts the following source. And this is what we're going to deal with for the next little while. This other source. Something we saw already a few times. In Yevamot and Nadarim, someone says this will be your get, sha'a achat kodem lemitati. This will be your get an hour before I die. What's the point of doing this? He's not ready to die right now. He just says, an hour before I die, this get will go into effect. Asura le'echol b'truma miyad. If she's married to a kohen, she can't eat truma right away because potentially any hour of the day, of the year, of the whatever, could be the hour before he dies. Why would he do this? He does this because he wants to avoid her having to do yibum or chalitza. That's usually why, the assumption of why someone would do this. So they basically say, if I die, the get will go into effect, right? You take the get now. It will go into effect an hour before I die because ein get lachar mita. You can't give a get after that. But this will retroactively go into effect an hour before I die, and then you'll have a get. So in terms of truma, you can't eat truma because you can't eat truma if you're, right? If this could be the hour before he dies, then you're forbidden to eat truma, that hour. So therefore, we don't let you eat truma at all. So now, what do you see? The fact that they don't let you eat truma seems that for the purposes of truma, at least, although, well, right now we're going to see even should be for the purposes of get, we assume that maybe any hour you're going to die. So that seems to be a presumption of death, as opposed to our Mishna, which said we presume you're still alive. So that's the problem. Now we're going to see possible resolutions to this problem. So Amarle, the first answer, Rava answers and says, Truma a Gittin karamit. You're bringing a contradiction between truma and get. Those two things are totally different. Truma efshal, get lo efshal. Truma, you have an alternative. You can eat something else. You don't have to eat truma. But get, if we don't allow the messenger to deliver the get because we say maybe the guy's dead, well, then the woman will have no way to get divorced, in which case she'll be an aguna again. We don't want women to be agunot and stuck in a marriage where they're not really married anymore. So therefore, since there's no choice by get, we allow it by get. That's the answer. The problem with this answer is obvious, which is, what about, our Mishnah also talked about truma, right? Rami truma, truma. If you're going to say truma, well, since she can eat something else, we'll forbid her to eat truma, and we'll assume he's dead in the case, this will be your get an hour before I die. Well, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah says her husband goes abroad, we don't have to worry that maybe he died, she could still eat truma. And this braita says this will be your get an hour before your death, she can't eat truma. So when it comes to truma itself, we have one source that says we worry that she's dead, and one source that he died. The other source says we don't worry that he died. So you can't answer, oh, don't question truma to get, and say that's the distinction, because even truma goes on both sides. So that really is a problem with Rava's answer. So Amar Rav Yitzchak, he tries to explain the difference, but in a way that doesn't really make sense, and we'll see in a second that they say this doesn't make any sense. Shani hatam shahare asra alav sha'a achat kodem mitato. In the case of this will be your get an hour before your death, there definitely will be a case where she will be forbidden to truma when he's still alive. Because whenever he dies, an hour before the death, she'll already be forbidden. So because it will definitely happen, as opposed to the woman whose husband goes abroad, maybe he'll die, maybe he won't die, therefore she can eat truma in that case, but she can't eat truma in the other case, because it will definitely happen that there'll be a time when she can't eat truma, because there'll be a time that will be an hour before the death, and therefore let's just worry that any time is that time. It's not exactly a clear-cut answer to why, and they're going to say, Papa, it's not true that you said there definitely will be a time where she won't be able to eat truma. Why? Exactly what you just said, Gita. How do you know he's going to die first? Maybe she'll die first. So it's not definite that in her lifetime there'll be a time where she can't eat truma, because if she predeceases him, then she'll never eat the truma. She'll always be able to eat the truma. She'll never get to that state. So that's not a good resolution to the inner contradiction of the truma to truma. Again, Rava answered the broad contradiction between the Mishna and the braita about get and truma by saying, oh, one's get, one's truma. Then we said, but even in truma, our Mishna says that we're not worried, and that braita says we are. And we tried to say maybe that one's different because it's about something in the future, right? And that there will be a time in his life where she won't be able to eat truma, and therefore let's just forbid her always, which is not the same in the case of the husband who goes abroad, to which our Papa says that's just not true, because she could die before him and then not eat truma then. And then she'll never get to the time where she doesn't eat truma. So that doesn't make sense. So now we reject the first answer, basically. Rava's answer doesn't really hold water because it doesn't stand up to the test, because truma also appears in our Mishnah as chizkat chayim. So move on. Next answer, and this is going to go back to the breira sugya, or not really the breira sugya, the one that we ended up saying isn't breira, and we'll talk about in a minute. Ela amar Abaye lo kasha ha-Rabbi Meir de lo chayish lemita, ha-Rabbi Yehuda de chayish lemita. Oh, don't worry about the contradiction. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir, who's not worried all the time that someone's going to die. And the braita that says the woman can't eat truma immediately is Rabbi Yehuda, who's always worried about death, right? There's people who live their lives thinking, tomorrow I'm going to die, I better do everything today. Other people who say, I know I'm going to die at some point, but it doesn't seem to me around the corner, I'm not really worried about it. And that's the distinction here between the two sources. It's a different kind of life attitude. And in fact, where do you see that Rabbi Meir is not worried about death, and Rabbi Yehuda is? In the Mishnah we just quoted before, it's not. Someone who purchases wine from kutim, who were concerned they don't take truma to masrot, and either he didn't have a flask to put the truma maser into, or it was Friday, Erev Shabbat, right Ben Hashmashot, as Shabbat was coming in, and he didn't have a chance to do the truma to masrot. So what does he do? He can say, the 2 log that I will eventually, right, after Shabbat or when I get a flask, that I will separate will be truma. 10 log will be maaser rishon. Tisha maaser sheni umecha b'shotem miyad. And then the maaser sheni redeems on a coin, and then he can eat immediately. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon osrin. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon all say no. And what do we see here? If you remember, the Gemara had already just said that Rabbi Yehuda says, how can you eat it? Aren't you worried it's going to break? And Rabbi Meir said, no, if it breaks, I'll deal with it when it breaks. I'm not worried about it breaking. That's the exact same thing as here, right? Where basically, are you worried someone's going to die, or you're not worried they're going to die? Are you always the worrier type, or you're not the worrier type? They assume if you're going to worry about a flask breaking, you're going to worry about a person dying. And if you're not worried about a flask breaking, you're not going to worry about a person dying. And that's how Abaye explains this contradiction. But Rava is not so sure about this. Rava Amai, he tries to distinguish between the two cases. Just because they say it there doesn't mean they're going to say it there. Turning now to Amabed. Shema me lo cheshina. Shema yamut cheshina. He says, he doesn't make this distinction. Sorry, the distinction is going to come up further on. Rava brings a totally different answer. Abaye's answer is actually fine. We could say it's Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. But Rava says it's a difference between, did the person already die, or perhaps the person will die? Okay, it's hard to understand exactly, and the commentaries try to figure out why this distinction is a significant one, but let's just try to understand the distinction. Shema mate is the guy sends a messenger, and did the guy die or not, right? You have to worry that the guy died. Okay, we're not worried the guy died. That nobody's worried about. The question is, now, I want to eat truma now. My husband said this will be a get an hour before he dies. Do we have to worry that my husband might die in the future? It's looking toward the future rather than the present. The present, we're not worried. If I don't know he's dead, I don't have to think he's dead now. But I do have to worry that maybe something will happen in the next hour, which means that right now I can't eat truma. And that's a distinction Rava sets up. So Amalei Rabbi Elazar Bar Rava. Now we're going to go back to the distinction between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Now, the assumption he's making right now, because he disagrees with Abaye, is that everyone would agree Shema Yamut, we worry about, and that it's not a machloka between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Are we worried maybe the flask will break, maybe the person will die? it sounds like he thinks everybody thinks that, because he doesn't put it like Abaye did, distinction Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir. So Shema Yamut Cheshinan, they think that Rava means everybody's worried about that. Okay, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda would be concerned Shema Yamut, to which Amalei Ravad Raman Rava Vahanod Shema Yamutu Pligi. But the case with the flask is a case of future. Maybe it will break, right, before Shabbat's over or before I get to put it to another flask. And they do disagree. So how can you say we're going to distinguish Shema Mate, nobody's worried about, Shema Yamut, everybody's worried about? It's not true. Shema Yamut, everybody's worried about. Rabbi Meir doesn't think we're worried. He says, when it breaks, we'll deal with it. So one possible way of doing this is to say maybe it's not the same concern, right? We kind of put it as, okay, you're a worrier. You worry things will break. You worry someone will drop dead. But those two things are different types of worries. Rav Yosef diskarta shani node the efshar demasar leila shomil. A node, this flask, is very easy. Just give it to somebody to watch to make sure it doesn't break. If that's what you're worried about, there's a way to protect it from breaking. But a person dying, we all know, right? We wish that we could figure out a way to prevent people from dying. Yes, it's true there are certain things we can do, but overall, we really can't prevent people from dying. So therefore, it could be that there's a distinction. So when it comes to the node, there actually is a debate. But when it comes to the person dying, there's no debate because it's something that we can't control. To which Rav Shasha doesn't like Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda's distinction. He says, Arvayach arvat tzarich. Even if you give it to a guard to watch, that guard needs a guard to watch him. In other words, just because someone's guarding it doesn't mean they're going to do a perfect job. They might get distracted and it'll break. They might say, I'm holding it very carefully, and they'll drop it. They need someone to watch them to make sure it doesn't break. And that's not really going to protect it 100% either. So really, they're both one and the same. To which Ella Amar Rava, so in this case, they basically say, let's just modify what Rava said. If you have this problem that Rava said, Shema Yamut, everyone's concerned that that maybe he'll die, and that's why Hareza Gitech is according to everybody, maybe you don't have to say that. Ela Amar Rava, Shema Mate Lo Cheshinan. Okay, nobody's worried that the person's already dead. But Shema Yamut Tenaihi. So our Mishna goes according to everybody. Nobody's worried. You can assume people are alive. The guy sends you as a messenger to bring the get, you can just assume he's still alive. But when it comes to the case of Hareza Gitech, Sha'acha Kodem Mitati, then we get into the machloket Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir will say we don't worry. And then the braita doesn't follow Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda says, we're worried, maybe he'll die. Every moment you have to be concerned. Maybe it's the hour before his death, because who knows, right? A car could come around the corner and run him over. Who knows what could happen? And therefore, we're going to say, therefore this, Rabbi Yehuda says, the woman can't eat teruma immediately because you have to be worried about that possibility. But Rabbi Meir wouldn't necessarily say that. Okay? So according to Abaye, it's a split. Our Mishna is Rabbi Meir, and the braita is Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rava, in the end, the way they say Rava, our Mishna is according to everybody. Because even Rabbi Yehuda, who's worried Shema Yamu, right, Shema, it'll break, is not worried Shema that he already died. He's only worried in the future he might die. In the future it might break. But the braita is only Rabbi Yehuda's position. So with that, we have basically three ways to try to resolve it. The first was the difference between get and teruma, but that one we rejected. That was Rava's explanation. And then we had Rava and Abaye. Okay, now we're moving on. So someone sends a chatat from abroad, you can sacrifice it and not worry they're dead. But now they say we have a different problem. Don't you need to do smicha on a korban chatat? So, which is where you put your weight on the animal. Rav Yosef, we'll have two possible answers. The korban nashim. Maybe they're talking about the korban of a woman. A woman who sends a korban doesn't have to, because smicha is an option for women. It's optional. It's not obligatory. Some people say that it's the famous sugya, by the way, about women who want to opt into doing mitzvot that they're exempt from. Are they allowed to or not? And one of the famous sugyot is the women, nashim samchot reshut. They say they can if they want. And there they learn about the possibility of opting into mitzvot. Not everyone agrees with that, but there is that opinion, and it's a opinion that is used and quoted. Rav Papa Amar b'chatat ha'of. Papa says it could be a sin offering brought with a bird, and there's no smicha on birds, only animals. So there we resolve that side issue. And now we want to go back to the Mishna and say, why did you have to bring us all three cases? Why did you bring us the three cases of a guy who sends a get, the woman whose husband goes abroad and she wants to eat teruma, and the chatat that's brought from abroad that needs to be brought as a korban? And it's the kohen's deliberation, does he bring it or not? So it's tzricha. We need all three cases. If it was get, you would have said, well, there's no possibility otherwise, right? The woman will become an aguna. If we don't allow, if we say messengers always have to be worried about someone dying, they'll never bring a get, or at least the person's over a certain age or something. Or sick. Truma, the efshar emalo. But truma, we already said, she can always find something else to eat. But yes, we on truma, and if you told us truma, well, she could still eat truma. You could say dezimnim delo efshar. There are some times where all there is, they're kohanim, most of the food in their house is truma. So it could be that there are times when she really has nothing to eat, and then, of course, we'll allow it. But then we still needed the third case, because to bring chulin into the temple, right? We don't know, but maybe he's dead, and then there's no need, or maybe she's dead, and then there's no need, right? You can't bring something; it's not a sacrifice anymore. You can't bring it into the temple. Maybe you wouldn't allow that. That's why we needed all three cases. So that's the end of this section. Before we start the next Mishnah, I'll do the summary. We started with who we hold like in terms of la'alter, if you find again immediately. And then why didn't they say, I hold like him, And that's because there was a little confusion about it. Who said what? We explained what the hafisa and the deluskama are. Then we went to this new Mishnah about hizkat chayim, presuming someone's alive. And then we basically, first Rava said, it depends what age he is, and Abaye didn't like that. Said it should seem even 100. We're not really worried you're going to die tomorrow. And then we brought this contradiction that Abaye raised between this and the braita about harei zagitech, an hour before your death, where we say teruma, right? She can't eat teruma immediately. Why there do we assume he's going to die? And here we don't assume he's dead, right? In the end, we brought up some distinctions, 3 possible answers. The first one rejected, the other 2 were accepted. Although the third one needed to be modified a bit because it didn't make so much sense. And then we just had this side issue about how you bring the chatat without doing smicha. And then we said why you need all 3 cases in the Mishna. Okay, moving on to a new Mishna. Rabbi Elazar ben Parta. There were 3 things that Rabbi Elazar ben Parta said before the rabbis, and they accepted what he said. And the 3 things are really going to split into 2 categories. Okay, he talks about 3 types of situations, but in 2 different kind of ways. So we'll see right now. Al ir shekifua karkum. Okay, there's a legion that comes and puts a siege on the city. Al svina mitulefet bayam. There's a boat that's, in the middle of a storm at sea. V'aliyotze lidon, and someone who's about to get convicted. He's not convicted yet, but he went to court to get convicted on a case, or at least to get, judged on a case that's capital punishment. Shehem b'chazkat kayamim. Even though there's clearly danger to their lives, there's a siege on the city, the boat might sink, they might get judged to death, they're still presumed innocent. But aval ir shekavshua karkum. But if, now we're going to get to the second stage of these 3 things. If the city was actually captured already, and then they're killing people in the city, or sfina she'avda bayam, or the boat is lost at sea, and someone who's about to be executed, meaning he's been convicted already, basically, we're going to treat them now. You would say they might be presumed dead. No, they're not presumed dead. But you have to be strict as if they're alive and if they're dead. Okay, so now, but what would that mean? Here's a ramification. The Mishna tells you, Bat Yisrael kohen, ubat kohen Yisrael lo tochal b'truma. The woman who's the daughter of a Yisrael and married to a kohen, and now the kohen is about to be sentenced, is already sentenced to death and about to be executed, or one of the 3 things is in the city where it's been captured, she already can't eat teruma. And also, if she's a bat kohen and married to a Yisrael, we don't assume he's dead yet, that she can now go back and eat teruma in her father's house. Basically, this is strict rules on this side and that. Okay, so you have to assume both alive and dead. So comes Rav Yosef and says the following. Today we're going to learn the whole first version of Rav Yosef. Tomorrow we're going to get to a different version of Rav Yosef. But for right now, this is the first version. Am Rav Yosef, lo shanu ela bebeitin shel Yisrael. Aval bebeitin shel avdei kochavim, kevan digamir leidina lekatla miktal katlele. What does he say? This issue that we treat a person once they're convicted to death as possibly alive, possibly dead, is only in a Jewish court. Because in a Jewish court, if someone comes at the last minute, they're about to shoot you or kill you or however they're going to kill you, they don't shoot you, but sword or whatever death you're supposed to get. And someone says, wait, I think I can free them. I think it's not true. They're not guilty. So we'll open the case again. But that's only in a Jewish court. And that's why you have to treat them as maybe they're alive, maybe they're dead, and both stringencies. But bebeitin shel avdei kohavim, kevan degamer leidina lekatla mital katlele. Once they rule that you're going to get killed, you are a dead person. They're not going to change their mind ever. There's nothing that's going to make them change their mind. If someone comes saying, I think they're innocent, they're going to ignore them. Again, this is Gentile courts of those days, right? They're talking about probably the Roman courts or the Persian courts, or right what they saw happening in their town, where they didn't feel like the court system was very fair. So in that case, you're definitely dead, and you don't have to worry. So let's say she's a bat kohen, she can go back and eat teruma in her father's house. Amalei Abaye. So now we're going to have a number of questions. First, Abaye asks a question from logic or reality on the ground. He's, as opposed to, let's say, a Tanaitic source, which is going to be the next type of question. What do you mean? They take bribes. Maybe someone could pay them off at the last minute and they'll let the guy go. So what do you mean? They're known to take bribes. It's a weird word. When do they take bribes? They only take bribes before the ruling. The bribes are to change the judge's mind before he rules. But once they rule, they don't change their mind at all. That would make them look bad. Okay, they only take bribes at an early stage, and therefore we're past that stage. At this stage, there are no bribes. So first question against Rabbi Yosef is resolved. Second question, Meitive. Let's bring a question from a Tanaitic source. And this is in a Jewish court. Two people come up and they come to the court and they say, listen, midim anu et ish ploni, shenigmar dino bebeitin shel ploni. Uploni uploni edav. Okay, the guy comes and he says, listen, I know that in the court of so-and-so, this guy was convicted to the death penalty. And these are the witnesses who were in the case. We accept these witnesses' testimony that this guy was already convicted and this person will be killed. And it sounds like they'll be killed and there's nothing, that's a done deal. So here you see, sometimes in Jewish courts, it's a done deal. To which they answer, Dilma Boreach Shani. This is different. What was the case here? The case here was that the guy ran away. He was obviously convicted in one court. And then he ran away from that court. And he's living in a new city, pretended to be somebody else. And two witnesses see him and recognize him and know that he was convicted in the other court. They come to the court and they say, listen, this guy is living in our town like he's a regular guy. He was convicted by some other court. In that case, we're not going to change our mind, because the fact that he ran away, they take as an indicator that obviously he's guilty, and therefore, by the way, isn't necessarily true. He could have run away because he didn't want to get the death penalty because he's not guilty. But anyway, they take it as a possibility that this is different from a regular case. And that's why he will definitely go to death, and he won't be, and then you really theoretically could presume that he's dead. Although it's not like that sort of talks about presumption of death. It's not like it says he's definitely going to be killed, but it does seem to indicate, you can kill him based on that, and done deal. Third source, and this will finish with, this will just take a little while to get to the difficulty. First, we'll read the source, and then we'll try to figure out what some of the words mean, and then kind of bring it as a contradiction, and then resolve it. Tashma, let's learn from here. So third question against Rav Yosef that we will resolve, and then, as I promised, tomorrow we'll get to the second version of Rav Yosef. Shamami beitin shel Yisrael shayu omrim ish ploni met, ish ploni neharag. So here in a Jewish court, they said this person is dead, this person was killed. Yasiyu et ishto, based on the testimony, right? That they said this, they can marry off the wife. They can assume it's true. Mikomentarisin shalovdei kochavim. Okay, these were the people who actually executed people, so the executioners of the Gentiles. If they were executioners of Gentiles who say ish ploni met, so and so died, ish ploni ne'arag, this person was killed, Al yasiu et ishto. You can't marry the wife based on their testimony. Now, right now, we assumed mate meant they said the person's dead. Well, my mate, umay neherag. So that's the end of the braita. Now we have to understand what the words mean. Ilema mate mamash. If you think mate means really dead, and neherag means neherag mamash, killed, okay, which is basically they're testifying that this guy is dead. Well, then the second part makes no sense. If these Gentile executioners say, this guy's dead, this guy was killed, of course you can marry his wife. She can get married to anyone else. Why is that? Don't we know? Now, generally, we don't accept Gentile witnesses in our courts, but we do accept them if they're what's called mesiach lepitumo. They don't have any ulterior motive for lying. They're just stating what, in a normal manner, they happen to be announcing all these people are dead. If someone's just saying something, not to be testimony to permit the wife to get married, which maybe we suspect them of lying because they're not Jews. And again, this is all in a world when the Gentiles and Jews did not have a good relationship here, and therefore there was always suspicion about them. So we don't necessarily believe them. So I'm sorry, we wouldn't believe them about other things, but if they're just saying it and they have no ulterior motive to mess up our lives or anything, then let's believe him. So why wouldn't you be allowed to marry the woman if they said the guy's dead? In which case, that leads them to say that elalav mate, and it's not what you thought mate was, but mate is yotze lamut, going to be killed, going to be executed. Neherag yotze lehare. Makes sense, by the way, if we're talking about execution, the execution people, right? The people who are killing the people. Then it makes sense even that we would say this, that they're announcing who is about to be killed. Okay, and now, if this is who's about to be killed, then we have a total contradiction to Rav Yosef, because what did the braita say? If it's in a Jewish court and they say this person's going to be executed, then what should the Mishna said? We have to be suspicious, right? Maybe he's dead, maybe he's alive. This says he's definitely dead. You can go get his wife remarried. And the Gentile court, Rav Yosef said it's definitely the guy's going to be killed. Here we actually say the opposite. It's not definite they're going to be killed. And you can't marry the wife based on that testimony. So it's the exact opposite. So again, we took what looked like the simple reading is they're announcing a death announcement. We say it can't be that because it makes no sense. So it must be they're announcing someone's going to be executed. And then the conclusion is the exact opposite of Rav Yosef. In order to resolve, right? Bekatane, Beitin Yisrael, Beitin Yisrael, yasiu et ishto. And then that becomes the problem because he said you can't. So now the way we're going to do this is go back to the original explanation, say this isn't talking about someone who's about to be executed. It really was that they were announcing people who died. Now the big question is, why didn't we believe the Gentile then? What you said about the Gentile, why not? Well, right? Don't we know that you can believe them in Mesiach Lefitumo? That's only if they're not connected in any way to this, meaning, again, they have no ulterior motive. That's exactly what Mesiach Lefitumo means. Now we're going to prove that in this case, there could have been an ulterior motive. What is that? They want to show that they're tough guys and that they kill people. So it could be they're just announcing that we killed these people and they didn't really. And they're only doing it to show off and to probably they're showing off to scare people. So the people will listen to them and say, look, we killed this person. And maybe it's not really true. And that's why you can't marry the woman, because we don't believe them. And then this has nothing to do with Rav Yosef, and we're good to go. So what we did in this section was we saw this split of 3 cases like this and 3 cases like that of Rabbi Elazar bar Parta, where the rabbis agreed with him that, where there's, let's say, 50% chance the guy's going to be killed, we assume he's alive. When there's already, it goes up to 80, and I'm just randomly giving numbers, but when it's already 80, then we're already going to say, once it's to 80%, we have to be worried that maybe he's alive or maybe he's dead, and we have to treat it to the chumras of both directions. Then Rabbi Yosef said, treat it in the chumras of both directions in the case of someone who's about to be executed would only be in a Jewish court. But in a Gentile court, we know for sure they're going to be executed. And then we brought 3 questions against him, 1 about the bride, and then 2 these Tanaitic sources, but all of them were resolved, and we have no questions against Rav Yosef. But as I promised, Ika de Amre, Amar Rav Yosef, but then we're going to get tomorrow, the very bottom of today's daf, which is some people say that Rav Yosef actually said something different. We'll see that in tomorrow's class. Wishing everybody a great day.